fairly opaque dispute is how on earth do you keep a peerage nomination alive if you don't announce it? And it seems as though Boris Johnson thought that Rishi Sunak was up for quietly feeding back into the machine peerages like the one on offer to Nadine Dorries from Boris Johnson, quietly doing that in the background. And it would appear as well at the same time as though Rishi Sunak had no such intention whatsoever and thought that procedural stretching of the mechanisms as he understood it reeked of impropriety. I just spoke to one cabinet minister who worked under Boris Johnson, quite a loyalist. He said Boris Johnson couldn't spell impropriety, but he feels he's been robbed of some names on that list. Nadine Dorries, I believe, is going to go on the telly tonight calling Rishi Sunak a liar. All of this points to an enormously dysfunctional series of relationships at the very top of the Tory party. And they were relationships which, to some extent, Rishi Sunak wanted to patch up. There was a meeting to try and agree a truce between him and Boris Johnson only 10 days ago. Because Rishi Sunak obviously thought he needed Boris Johnson's support in red wall seats, that has fallen apart. Who knows where this relationship ends, but right now it's in an appalling state.
10 days ago, Boris Johnson went to see Rishi Sunak in the Prime Minister's office inside Parliament, supposedly to negotiate a truce. Rishi Sunak wanted Boris Johnson's help in the general election. Boris Johnson wanted confirmation the MPs he'd promised peerages to would get them. Today, Rishi Sunak, speaking at a tech conference, hit back at Boris Johnson's suggestion that he'd reneged on a deal and accused Boris Johnson of asking for something improper.
When it comes to honours and Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson asked me to do something that I wasn't prepared to do because I didn't think it was right. That was to either overrule the HOLAC committee or to make promises with people. Now, I wasn't prepared to do that. As I said, I didn't think it was right. And if people don't like that, then tough. When I got this job,
Boris Johnson hit back saying Rishi Sunak is talking rubbish. Boris Johnson believes Rishi Sunak should have resubmitted the names of the MPs he wanted to put in the House of Lords. They didn't clear vetting first time round because they hadn't committed to resigning as MPs, triggering by-elections. Rishi Sunak insists he made no promises in his Commons office to do anything of the sort.
Boris Johnson came away saying he thought Rishi Sunak was going to bend the rules for him.
Well, if you got the wrong impression, as someone who has given the wrong impression to a rather large number of people in his career, he perhaps ought to be a little more alert to the possibility.
And that from one of the 70 or so stalwart parliamentary supporters of Boris Johnson who turned up in Downing Street 9 months ago to wave their hero off.
You were there in the street cheering
Yes.
Boris on as he left.
Yes.
And you know, don't you, that there's a lot of people in the party for whom the flame has not died, who still would like Boris Johnson there.
But there are not very many in the parliamentary party now.
And in the wider party?
There's a decreasing number. But they will watch what has happened over this weekend and they will go, he's not actually served the party interest here.
He's alienated people. He's burnt some
and
bridges
people will be beginning to say, this soap opera has really got to come to an end.
Our economy is in much better shape. Our politics doesn't feel like a box set drama anymore.
Rishi Sunak only last month boasted he'd killed the soap. But it's back and it's triggered and may shape by-elections, which look set for next month. Labour were in second place in the general election in Nadine Dorries' mid-Bedfordshire constituency. Today, the Lib Dems were out. Their leader was unimpressed by Rishi Sunak's claim he'd stood up to Boris Johnson.
To say that a British Prime Minister has for once done the right thing shows you how dreadful the Conservatives have been because they keep doing the wrong thing.
Rishi Sunak will be encountering voters in 3 by-elections while his pledges are far from delivered on and the Tories are fighting each other.
Do you think Rishi Sunak's come out better at the moment?
Well, he's a chap who he looks a genuine kind of a fella. Always got a smile on his face. I like him. I like the bloke.
I never thought I would change, but as I say, I'm seriously thinking, giving it some thought. And they have been round trying. I mean, they came round pretty quick. the Liberals and the Labour, they were around knocking on our door.
This time, probably Lib Dems, to be honest with you. I've read all the leaflets.
Welcome to Friday Night with Nadine.
Sources across the Tory divide suggested Rishi Sunak maybe just couldn't bring himself to re-nominate Nadine Dorries for a peerage in his own name.
Rishi Sunak came close last Thursday to taking Theresa May's crown as one of our biggest vote losers. All eyes were on Boris Johnson and all the media and the comms were on Boris Johnson. Then he'd reveal the fact that he's taken £5 million in earnings over the last 3 years. He's been fined again now. Is Rishi some kind of out-of-control maverick, do you think?
Look, it's only a year since Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were side by side in the cabinet. Only 10 days since they sat together again trying to patch up a truce. Tory wars are back centre stage, exactly where Rishi Sunak knows the voters don't want them.
Gary Gibbon. Well, I'm joined now by Damien Green, who was Deputy Prime Minister under Theresa May. Thank you for joining us. Who do you believe when it comes to this version of events, Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak?
I believe the Prime Minister's version. I think what Rishi said is both eminently plausible and also, I therefore suspect, completely true.
And so, what is going on with Boris Johnson? I mean, are these more... I mean, it's difficult to know, isn't it? I mean, this is a man who has been sacked in the past for lying, who has been found to have misled Parliament now. You know, how much of what he says do you ever believe?
I mean, the truth is that neither of us was in the room, so you know, we can't make a definitive view. But it does seem to me very likely that what Rishi said was the plain truth. That's the way he speaks. That's what he does, and I think people will recognise this. And I think the characterisation of this as a sort of war that's going to break out actually will prove in the medium and long term to be wrong. I think clearly this has been a fairly turbulent 72 hours or so, and the by-elections have to be fought. But nevertheless, I think that in the medium term, by which I mean well before the next election, this will all have disappeared into the beyond the rear-view mirror.
Do you think these by-elections are being called and these resignations have happened in order to embarrass Rishi Sunak? Because there's a likelihood some of them at least will be lost.
Well, I mean, it's not clear to me whether, for instance, Nadine and Nigel, who both resigned, have resigned for the same reason. Clearly, Boris has fallen out big time with Rishi, and we all read the statement he put out. But I want to see the government get back to doing what people want it to do. The 5 priorities are very good. We're making progress on them. And I think that the sort of Westminster psychodrama, psychodrama was a word not used much in politics before the last few years. And I think that the sooner it's over, the better, not just for the Conservative Party, not just for the government, but for the country as well. Let's get back to having a government that just governs the country.
But it's never over, is it? Because, I mean, Boris Johnson always has people who want him back, who think he's a winner, and who, think his supporters are out there saying it's not over, he'll be back, he'll stand again one day, might take 2 years, but, So it is never over, and that creates an impression that Rishi Sunak is just not in control of his own destiny.
Well, I think Rishi spoke very strongly today, as you've said, and you heard in Gary Gibbon's report. And I think that shows the kind of strength and steel that he has, that he's not going to be pushed off course. And the sad truth for all those who've been in politics is that there's nothing as an ex-MP, and Boris and some of his strongest supporters have now decided to become ex-MPs. And once you're out of Parliament, you have less influence than you do when you're inside Parliament. So even though Boris is a brilliant writer and obviously command huge media attention, but I think you have less political power as an ex-MP than you do when you're an MP.
And when it comes to sort of the factions in Parliament, are you all Rishi Sunak supporters now? I mean, there is still a sort of a Boris Johnson wing, isn't there?
Well,
or is it diminishing?
Well,
I mean, they are quitting, I suppose.
I mean, at least 3 of them have quit the party. But also we saw in what was quite a significant vote on the Windsor Declaration, a very welcome agreement on Northern Ireland, that there were people rebelling against that, but it was just over 20. So that's not a wing. That's a small number. The largest group within the Conservative Party, and of course there are groups within any party, the largest group is the One Nation group. We are I chair it, and we are the heart, we are the mainstream of the Parliamentary Conservative Party.
And do you share that sort of sense of outrage that many people have been articulating at Boris Johnson's honours list?
I'm not going to comment on individuals, colleagues. I do actually have a real sense of outrage on behalf of my colleagues who sit on the Privileges Committee, who have been doing a very difficult job, very seriously. We don't even know what conclusions they've come to yet. We can guess because we've all read Boris's article. But actually, I think the personal attacks on them are disgraceful.
So what do you think should happen to people like Dame Andrea Jenkins, as she's soon to be, who called the Privileges Committee a kangaroo court?
Well, I completely disagree with her, and I think
should she be sanctioned? Should she be suspended?
I'm not a fan of cancel culture, but I am perfectly prepared to say in public what I think, which is that the members of the Privileges Committee and those who are under most pressure inevitably are my Conservative colleagues, the 4 Conservative colleagues on that Privileges Committee, who have had some pretty unpleasant things said about them on social media, who've required extra protection, and it is an absolute disgrace if anyone who calls themselves a Conservative is attacking other Conservatives personally like that.
I mean, that is normally contempt of Parliament, isn't it? I mean, shouldn't those people be hauled before the Privileges Committee?
I don't think politicians attacking each other is necessarily contempt of Parliament, in the sense is what Parliament's for. We attack each other.
Calling a parliamentary institution a kangaroo court.
Well, I think it's for the Privileges Committee to decide that. I think, frankly, the sooner we all get over this bit of the psychodrama, the better. So I'm not going to say what should happen, because I don't want to engage in the sort of politics that people who indulge personal attacks all the time engage in. I think that's the wrong type of politics, and I don't like to see Conservative, not just MPs, but Conservative supporters in the press and so on, doing that kind of thing. I don't think it's the way we should conduct politics in this country.
Damien Green, thank you very much.